Welcome to The Dark Road Ahead, a podcast about the history and future of anthropomorphic climate change. The Dark Road Ahead is hosted by myself, Kevin Brown. The first two episodes of this podcast will explore the geological formation of the two most commonly used carbon-based fuels that present the most overwhelming challenges in terms of their impact on climate versus their influence on modern life: coal and petroleum. These explorations are intended to serve as a lens to understanding why coal and petroleum are so unique among other potential energy sources, and why those unique properties make it so difficult to put even a single step forward in terms of transitioning towards alternative energy infrastructure. From there, we'll be jumping forward into contemporary topics surrounding man-made climate change, our global emissions budget, pipelines, alternative energy, policy solutions, etc. The struggle in front of us is significant, and we do not currently have good odds at preserving modern civilization. My hope is that by having honest and difficult conversations like this one, we might improve those odds by spurring more active and constructive involvement in our democratic systems, which ultimately set the policies that will determine whether or not we can reduce emissions in time to avoid catastrophic climate change. Episode 1: The Carboniferous. As much as 90% of the world's current coal reserves were formed during a single epoch on Earth, just over 300 million years ago, the Carboniferous, or coal-bearing era. This was a hot and swampy period, and one of many times that the world's land masses were mashing together to form supercontinents. In the southern hemisphere, Africa and South America had merged to form Gondwana. On the equator, Northern Europe, North America, and Greenland had merged to form La Russia. La Russia was home to the Lepidodendrales, trees whose trunks were covered with diamond-shaped photosynthesizing scales, and whose limbs ended in spiraling clusters of grass-like fronds. Reaching up to 30 meters tall, with a population likely in the billions, Lepidodendrales would have covered their range in a thick canopy akin to a modern rainforest. Current evidence suggests that these organisms reproduced by spores rather than seeds, and that many of their species only release their spores once in a lifetime. One might imagine how these spectacular and perhaps congesting events may have looked. The respiration of such successful populations of trees enriched the earth with oxygen levels not seen before or since. It is within these conditions that the planet was host to a number of gigantic invertebrate species: eagle-sized dragonflies, the Magonura; fawn-sized millipedes, the Anthropleura. Land-dwelling vertebrates were largely amphibians. Traveling back in time to our coal-bearing Earth, one might think that they had been shrunk and left stranded in an enormous wetland. For all their grandeur and population density, Lepidodendrales had at least one quite significant evolutionary trade-off: a very shallow root system. They were prone to toppling over. Unable to take in moisture from the soil and shaded by the overhead canopy from the nourishment of sunlight, such felled giants would, as you might expect, die just like any likewise blown over tree that isn't rescued from its predicament today. Unlike today, however, there were no bacteria on Earth back in the Carboniferous that had yet evolved a taste for wood. The bodies of the Lepidodendrales did not rot. They piled onto the forest floors of La Russia, then onto each other, littering the supercontinent with carbon-rich husks that could not decompose into the air and soil. Over millions of years, the Lepidodendrales were buried in sediment, sank deep into the earth, were crushed and compressed first into peat and then, finally, into coal. A 1 kilogram lump of this ancient compressed forest contains about 24 megajoules of energy, or the equivalent of more than 2 days' worth of hard physical manual labor. You pay a woman to shovel coal into a furnace, and in less than a day, she will achieve the same energy output as she otherwise would have, say, plowing a field or scything down crops for an entire year. The exploitation of this resource in the West kicked off the Industrial Revolution at the turn of the 18th century, and its exploitation today in Asia is allowing China and India to modernize, improving lives in the present while dimming the skies and creating uncertainties about the future. Like the Lepidodendrales from whence it came, coal has allowed humanity to reach incredible heights and cast long shadows while teetering on unsure footing. Among developed reserves, coal currently represents the most significant pressure against emissions targets, with a potential carbon footprint twice that of proven oil reserves and more than 3 times that of both proven and probable natural gas reserves. If we hope to stay on target to prevent catastrophic warming, most of the Lepidodendrales remains within the tomb of the Carboniferous strata must remain undisturbed.